Hello, welcome to the Nurture Pod. My name is Iris Sullivan Dare, and I'm here with the beautiful Ginger Edwards. And this is the place where we come together to explore that space, that riparian zone between what is and what is possible. So, yeah, how you
Yay.
doing, Mama?
I'm doing pretty good. I like this weird week that we're in. It's like a holiday week, and I feel like, I don't know, it just brings up lots of stuff. So I'm kind of excited to dig
Mm.
in, dig in, and let's do it. So I'm feeling ready to, yeah, like dig in on the metaphorical level of all of this, I don't know, consumption of ideas and processing stuff. So let's jump in. I'm going to ask you about your day
Mm.
because I know you had an interesting day.
Yeah, I started the morning with the realization that our some stuff had been stolen out of our car,
Mm.
including some stuff for work, and super triggered. Um, and it was interesting because I was like, and I also had a professional thing to do today. I had a meeting with my boss at 10 o'clock already scheduled and a Zoom call because we don't live in the same town. And then I had agreed to give a talk to a college color a design class in the East Coast that I prepared, slides for and was going to talk about natural colors and blah blah blah. Which is kind of like you have to kind of be on your deal to do that.
Sure.
So I was like, I have to get a handle on this, feeling super triggered. And so it was that was an interesting, interesting morning. And I ended up calling a friend because Joe had to go to work. And also I wasn't really available to be like for him to be helpful to me before he had to go to work. I wasn't in that space that another person would be helpful. I had to do some work on myself first before I could even be really receptive to somebody being helpful. But it was interesting. I think okay, so like several years ago, we had our place out at Swenson broken into and a bunch of stuff stolen. And I was in a tailspin for like weeks after that happened. And so anyway, so the difference between then and now is I think I've done quite a bit of I've done quite a bit of like the technology of realizing instead of just going in for the going for the throat of my puppet that's activated and being like, get a hold of yourself or whatever, and like hating on myself, I have the technology now that I didn't have then of, wow, I'm observing like in real time, like, oh my God, like I'm like panicking, even though it wasn't like anything like not, most of it is replaceable. Um, it's more like it's all the things, but it's not about what it was. It's really like the triggering is not really, it's not about logic and being able to like be kinder to myself and realize, oh, I am triggered. That's what's going on right now. It makes sense that I feel that way. I'm sure it's multifaceted and
Yeah.
and then yeah. So and then like, okay, what do I need? I need to like I need some empathy. I need to like
Hmm.
I need to talk to somebody that and and then I felt a lot better. And then like I talked to my boss and had to fess up that I had gotten the Chromebook stolen and some other things. And then that was kind of okay. Obviously it's not okay, but it's also like I'm not getting fired, so like
Yeah.
all the things. And then yeah. Anyway, that was that. Was that
It's great. I told you to save that story on purpose because I wanted to talk about this very idea of the parts of ourselves. Because
Mm.
I was just home. I just went home to Michigan to see my mom and my family, and that was last week. I kind of did the pre-Thanksgiving visit because I find that to be easier, both travel wise and just like in general. And one of the things that I found myself repeating to various members of my family as they, talked and struggled with different things was this idea that there are parts of ourselves. Like, you're not angry, there's a part of you that's angry. Or you're not triggered, there's a part of you that's triggered.
Yeah, yeah.
And I feel like this is called internal family systems. It's a pretty popular thing in psychology right now. I'm super into it. And the reason I'm super into it is because I think intuitively, like, this connects with our indigenous mythic mindset. Like, in the past, we have understood we are a multiplicity of things,
Mhm.
right? And so and I think when you look at indigenous cultures, or the ancient Celts, or just pick one anywhere around the world, they had these like pantheon of beings that were there. And I don't necessarily think that they believed in each one of them specifically as like a real thing, but it represented something, right? Like, it represented an energy that we all know kind of we can connect to. These are like representations of all of us, all the parts of us. And there's so
Mhm.
many parts of us. And so as we do, like, we're entering this kind of these winter holiday season, I think it's really interesting to start looking at like the internal families that we have in ourselves, the mythic
Yes.
families that we are surrounded by in many, many cultures and draw from, whether we realize it or not. We're still pulling those through. And then also our real families that we have to, go deal with and hang out with and heal with and all the things, communicate with. So I just think it's really interesting that you had this happen this morning, and it's a really challenging thing. And yet the gratitude. And so there's other piece I wanted to bring through is gratitude, because this word comes up this week, right? People are going to be like, what are you grateful for? And one of my things that my older sister, who had stayed with me for a month before I went home this week, she was in Oregon for a month over October. She was complaining that one of the things she's always trying to get our family to do back home is to do a little gratitude ceremony, like go around the table and say what you're grateful for. And everyone's extremely resistant and they think it's cheesy and they won't do it. And I was kind of feeling bad for her. And then as I listened to this really amazing talk by Michael Mead. If you guys don't know him, go look him up. He's an incredible teacher of mythology, and he's just a wonderful podcaster in his own right. And I just listened to his piece on gratitude, and he brought through this whole other piece talking about it that I thought was so interesting and very intertwined with this idea of there's this kind of family system within us. So yeah, I got all excited and I wanted to talk to you about it on the
Oh, I totally want to
podcast.
talk to you about
Because I think
it.
reframing this piece, it could be really helpful for a lot of people. I know it immediately helped me, and it was even helpful to understand like why there would be resistance around the table. Like, if at the surface of that, you're like, yeah, what's their problem? Like, why wouldn't they do it? But then we in this culture that we live in, we have these little pieces of things, right? Like these very shallow, like, rituals that we do in the consumer culture, in capitalism, that it's kind of like giving a little bit of lip service to a ritual. Like, we gather around and we have a meal, but the whole idea of these winter holidays was much richer and deeper. And gratitude was not something that you would have to like come up with. It was something that you would naturally feel after a cathartic ritual that you would have participated in. And the winter rituals, specifically, all these ones that happen in the dark part of the year in the northern hemisphere, would have been around like, yeah, what aren't we talking, like, what are the things that have come up, over the year that we haven't healed, that we haven't talked about, that we haven't, what are all the hurts I'm carrying that I've never spoken. So there would be a lot of like rituals of purging, and he gave an example in the Amazon of them throwing mud at each other until everyone was covered in mud. And it was just like, you said this and I say, and like, just like cover, and then everybody washes in the river together as
And
like a,
lets it all go.
yeah. And that's like their New Year before they have their New Year's party. Like, that was, and so I feel he was like saying, and I agree, the piece that's missing in the culture is any of that, like any talking, like real talk about, the pain I'm carrying. And then gratitude comes as a natural result after you get all that kind of out on the dance floor, and you've gone around, and you've done some healing work and been vulnerable. And everybody, gets their shame out or their grief out. Like we did a grief ritual and in September, and I was like, no, it was October, and I was like, well, that was a natural state of gratitude. That after that ritual was over, you could just see everybody hugging each other, and it was just like this gratitude for being seen and witnessed, that it was very real. And it's very, very different than going around the table and being like, what are you grateful for? Not that there's anything wrong with that, but there's just like, there was this deeper level of catharsis and being seen that happened at that space. So I don't know. There's a lot I just
I,
threw out there. You can respond to any of that, Iris.
well, I was going to just to the, I've been thinking a lot about vulnerability
Mm-hmm.
and being people like feeling safe being vulnerable with each other and permissioning people to be a little bit more vulnerable because like um I do all this work with young people, and one of the things in this month's lesson is that we divide the class into three parts, and then we did this really like literally like less than a minute little song to as a metaphor for things mixing together and how that all works. And the first couple times I did it, I was having each group just practice their part while the other two groups watched them. And then I realized, oh no, that's like way too scary. Nobody's willing to risk. And so the whole class learned all three parts, which were very simple, so they could totally do that. And then everyone could do it. But like, so like when you think about the Thanksgiving table, if people are kind of like, all right, I'm a little scared. I think I'm going to end up acting like my 11-year-old self here at the table. And so they're kind of like they're not free to be vulnerable because they're waiting for because of probably like there's a backlog of unaddressed stuff like
Yes.
and I had an incident with I go to 29 classrooms, and I had one incident this month that was like less than awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But in the situation with that instructor, that teacher, I said a thing and then they were a little bit rude back. And I was so shocked that I didn't like call the person on it, like
Mm-hmm.
because it was kind of like, oh, and like, it's like, so anyway, so I guess what I'm saying is like with our families, there's often been we have sacrificed authenticity and intimacy
Mm-hmm.
for keeping the peace, which doesn't
100%.
actually keep the peace. And so here we are all together, and it's like it kind of is like your thing before about like our light's been covered with paint. Like even though these are the people that we love,
Mm-hmm.
if anytime you say, well, we can't talk about that, or why would you bring that up? Or we're just trying to have peace. But it's like, especially in situations in which you don't see each other regularly,
Mm-hmm.
that is the only time you can bring it up is when you're
Mm-hmm.
together. And so if you're not allowed to bring it up when you're together because it's a holiday or it's a wedding or it's a whatever, then years can accumulate of unmet.
Exactly. Like the family's not going to meet for the other ritual, right? Like they're not going to meet for the dark moon ritual where
Yes,
it's
yes.
appropriate for everyone to do this. And then the Thanksgiving table is for the celebration that we all have gratitude that we know each other and we've been able to express, our truth, our authenticity. So like that's what I mean. We take one part of it and we're like, everybody be grateful. And in the consumer culture, I feel like what we're expressing gratitude is for the things we have, which is interesting when you think about capitalism. It's like, look, we have this and we have this and we have, and it's just a piece of a much deeper like integration. Like gratitude, as Michael Mead kind of defines it, is a state of wholeness. And I thought that was
Mm,
really interesting because as he said, it's a state of temporary wholeness. And it's where we basically it's like if healing is what healing means is to put things back together, right? It's to make
Mm,
something whole. Then yeah, we're all walking around doing our own healing work, right? And gratitude is when we acknowledge, I think, that all the parts of ourselves, like we
mm,
understand that all the parts of ourselves are welcome and can sit at the table. And that may never happen in a family, but we could definitely do that for ourselves. Like it's an individual process before it's a collective process. So if we are going to going to a family situation and expecting them to acknowledge, to give us the state of wholeness, like be grateful for, we can't do that. It's an inside job first. Like we have to be grateful. And like you just expressed at the top of the podcast, which I loved, was that I heard the gratitude coming in that you can see where you are now, the reaction you're having now to be having someone break into your car and take something is different than the reaction you had to someone breaking into your home, however many years ago and stealing things. And that, even though it was a circumstance that was similar, you're still affected. You still had a bunch of stuff to do today. You know what I mean? Like you were still triggered. All your parts
oh
were still
yeah.
there. The wholeness that you're experiencing is the piece of you that was able to acknowledge, oh, look at my growth. I know what I need. You're able to reach out. And so parts of you, part of your internal family system, which is the part of you that acknowledged and is aware of, this is how I can heal myself, take care of myself in this moment. And who knew I don't have the capacity to talk to my partner about this right now. Like all that awareness, that's a piece. There's gratitude in just knowing like yourself at that level, at this part of your life. Like I can handle this. I can handle my internal family, reactions to all of this. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, like I think like the realizing that those parts of yourself that are the puppets are like when you're triggered and you've got this idea story coming up for myself, I'm realizing like those puppets are in good faith
Yes.
and not even though it might not actually be a very useful to the current situation, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like an out of date. um it's like I don't know, I just had a flash in my head of those. Do you remember like old typewriters and they had those little ribbons that you would,
Mm-hmm.
the inked ribbons? So it's sort of like, oh, my printer's out of ink. I'll go get one of those ribbons and try to install it. It just
Mm-hmm.
doesn't really fit. So like, um,
Yeah.
yeah, like but it's not, it's like, it's in good faith. It's just, so what needs to happen is that the current me needs to, it's not like put that part of myself in its place. Don't, stop that right now. It's
Yeah.
more like
No.
love, love, love.
Yeah,
And
exactly. It's like you're sitting at a Thanksgiving table and all your parts they're all sitting around the table with you, you know?
yes. And our
And
families totally
absolutely,
are
that's what I'm trying to
literally,
say. Yes,
yes,
literally, that's what
yes.
I'm trying to say is that is exactly what we experience when we get these gatherings. And all of a sudden now we have all the people. And of course, like we have that inside of us. We have all those pieces. And a lot of those pieces that we have are from our family of origin. I mean, no one escapes childhood without some trauma that they have to heal. And I think that's purposeful. Even if your parents were amazing, did the best possible
Yes.
job they could, it is our soul's journey to learn. We're not here to skate through. Like we're here to come in and learn stuff. So you're going to have things that you need to process. And one of the really cool things that Michael Meade laid out, which I really loved, was that in ancient Ireland, they had this belief of that the family of origin was only 1/3 of who you are. Like they could only claim responsibility for 1/3 of your existence. And they only claimed like parentage of 1/3. And the other two parts were your ancestors. So 1/3 of you was ancestral energy coming through into this lifetime. And then the last third was unique life energy that was yours, like it never before seen on earth. It's a unique spark that your particular life has. So, and they don't have control over that. They can't even claim responsibility for those other parts. They can claim like, this is my kid. This part of my kid is, is us. It's from our family. But the ancestral part and the part that's uniquely you, that's there to be fostered a little bit, but they don't claim that is, of them, which I thought was so cool, because if you have that thought, then you have this other layers of family inside of you. Like your internal family system is really maybe only a third of you, then you have this whole ancestral part that's just in the mix, that's got its
Yes.
own energy, its
Yeah.
its own agenda, its own healing, its own purpose, and this brand new energy that is forming in the moment as you make decisions, as you know, discover your purpose through your life, making mistakes, falling down, learning. All this is just happening. And so I thought it was such a great idea, because it really takes some of the pressure off this, like, my parents are, I'm the work of all of the, this is all on them. It takes, if you're a parent yourself, it takes a little pressure off. And then if you're a kid too, looking back at your parent, it's like, yeah, there's part of it is, but not all of it. And I know, and I thought the idea that in Ireland they have so many threes, in their
Yeah. Yeah.
system,
Yeah.
and that idea that there's these three parts of us really fit, like, in my head with the internal family system idea. I'm like, oh, I really love that. And then he goes on to say, and then you have that, and then they believe then there would be a rite of passage at some point for these children. It wouldn't just be like, and now just go out into the world and figure that out. There would be, teachings and mythology and stories about how the world works, and that all death begets life, and, all these ideas concepts that would be laid out. And then you would be, kind of acknowledging that you're coming in with inherent gifts from the ancestors. Your family is giving you gifts, and then you are a gift to the world uniquely yourself. And so trying to, like, make the initiation in adulthood about those three parts, like, what are we healing, what are we bringing forth, and what are we nurturing in the family unit itself, and what are we getting from that. And I just thought it was a really cool perspective. And then you tie that back to gratitude. If gratitude is a state of wholeness, it is those moments, those temporary moments when we feel and acknowledge that those are all kind of interplaying, that these are all the parts of us are here, good or bad, I guess. Because gratitude, I also don't think it needs to be, everything doesn't necessarily need to be going right to be in gratitude. Gratitude is the acknowledgement that, oh yeah, I'm all of this. And
Well, and
these pieces learn from each other. They connect and conversate, and, make each other more magical. They resonate with each other.
and part of what I just heard in that, which I want to connect to something you said earlier, but is there is plurality in that. It's not like our American lens is so um deeply individualistic.
Yes.
And like I would say that we are deeply social beings, and that yes, it is about doing your work yourself, but it's also that acknowledgement of being that individual part. I love this idea that that individual part is only a third of you,
Mm-hmm.
and a third of you is your family, and then a third of you is the ancestors or like the spirit world, really.
Mm-hmm.
And so like thinking of ourselves as more than just the individual, but there being room in there versus I think sometimes there is, I know, and there's a little bit of this in my family. I think this idea that, well, we are, you know, this, that, like this is what our family is. And this is what, what kind, like this identity as a, as a group needing to suppress individual stuff, so,
Oh
a
yeah.
little bit.
Yep.
So like, I think, there is some of that, of course, present in our world, but like, I don't know if that, anyway, that I like this plurality and individuality and there being a both and
Both
it's
and is, yeah. Yeah, I think that's really important, because I think when you get into polarities where, like you just mentioned, it's like us and them, like this kind of, and you see that so much. And of course, we just went through this big election, and like we saw how polarized people have become politically. And it was interesting to go home too into Michigan, which was very much, I mean, Trump signs everywhere, and very interestingly, Jesus won signs everywhere, which I was like,
Jesus won.
I didn't know Jesus was running, but okay. Yeah, they were all
Wow,
over the place. I was
wow,
like, wow.
wow.
Um, but but also that I, you know, that's just like one piece. It's like, politics, federal politics or national politics is one piece of what's happening in the world. It's not everything that's happening in the world, and how easy it is to get pulled into a polarity discourse around, oh, well, we're over here and they're over here. And I thought this whole idea really is like, when you're in that state of resentment and like judgment and anger, there is no gratitude, like, on either side. Like, you can't go to one side and be like, what are you grateful for? Like, it's just not even going to come up. They're like, no, I'm just going to be bitching about all the things that are wrong and all the things that should be changed. And that can go on either side. So I'm going to give that up evenly, because I know we're talking to people listening to this. They're going to go into groups of families that are going to have both sides. And I think it's really useful to think about that is not an energy where gratitude can exist, because it's divine. It's like, it's the wholeness is to understand that we're everything, like that all of these pieces are us. So I was trying to do like my practice at home, really listening for the values and the pieces that I did resonate with. And there was so much of it. If you just take the names out, and of the political names out of the mix, like, there's so much of it I did kind of understand, and I did get. And even though I don't change my mind, I was just like, okay, but I do resonate with what you're saying at that level, you know, and trying to bring it back to a piece of myself that a part of me gets that. Part of me gets wanting to change, like, radical change in the system. Yeah, of course we all want that. None of us are particularly happy. Um, and so I think that it was really interesting to think of gratitude as, yeah,
Wholeness.
it's a wholeness, and that in that is an acceptance of that duality is not the problem. Duality is necessary as a state of creativity. Like, we need these dynamic polarities pulling and pushing at each other. Like, that is actually, like, the chaos of all that is where new things emerge from and grow. And it's kind of that tension is actually really creative and interesting. And it isn't not to fall into that, like, oh, it's got to be this way or that way. It's like, no, 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 this is going to exist. And what can emerge from that's new, the wholeness that can emerge. And that's an individual process. Like I said, I think it's a collective experience we're having, but the work is done by every single
The,
person in their own journey. That would be like the mythic approach, right? Like, everybody's got to take their own journey to do
yes.
this work. And collectively we're transforming collectively, but each of us has our own journey to take. So I do think that, I'm not saying like make this your job and your family to find gratitude and wholeness for everyone, but when we find it,
I
um,
think it's contagious. I think
it's contagious, and it's also very grounding. Like, if people mentioned to me a couple times that they felt like my presence felt really grounded. And I think it was just because I was trying to stay in this like, I wasn't trying to like and it was unusual, because I usually, when I get home, my inner child gets triggered by something, like,
yeah.
and I get pulled into an old thought form. But I thought I was really practicing, and a lot of it did feel like gratitude. It was, and interestingly enough, not gratitude in the sense of, let's say what I'm grateful for, but gratitude in the sense of, it's all okay. Like, there's no problem here. The problem is thinking there's this big problem. Like, if I drop this idea that we have to pick sides, or that this experience has to be different, or this person has to agree with me, or, and I just let everyone be who they are. And then I work on my own self of, what, yeah, you just said, like, what part of me needs empathy? What part of me needs to rest? What part of me, work with my own internal family here and calm them down until, we can come back into a state of wholeness, of gratitude. And then in gratitude, I mean, it really, that's where healing emanates from, because you're not reacting. At that point, you're holding space for something new to emerge. And that's where grace enters in, I think. We talk about saying grace and all that, but like, everything, grace is the magic that we can't count on. We don't understand it. It just kind of flows in when we create a little
Mm.
space for it. And the dynamic, it's the piece that is new, the interesting new thing that can just, but only if we create that little bit of breathing room for it.
I've been really observing um, these kind of two levels of agency in the children I hang out with. So some of the kids have a lot of agency, which I'm generally interpreting meaning that they were seen and heard and safe at home. And like, so like we say, okay, we're going to do this project or this thing. And they're like, let me at the materials, and they're like totally diving in, just going for it. And then the children with less agency, less safety, less being seen, less, wantedness, um, they are very hesitant to do it. They're very concerned about whether it's going to be right or wrong. And, sometimes they kind of just want me to do it. I had a thing where we were sewing these little things, very simple little, and I observed a couple of the kids, like they were kind of doing fine. And then they, like I was, fielding questions from like 8 kids. So, and then seeing them like, I think what I was observing is that they would deliberately mess it up because then they would get my attention so that I would untangle the thread for them so that they could continue. And, and because they had this need, right? They need to be seen, they need to feel safe. But I guess I'm saying is that I, I think that adults, we are still those little kids. So fast forward, and it's like whether or not like your capacity to our capacity, my capacity to do this internal work at some point along the way, I think there needs to be some input from the outside to support you and trellis you in
Yes.
order to be able to see it and do it yourself. Because I think it's kind of it's like because I at first like when I would interact with the kid and they're like, "Can you just do it?" And I'd be like, "What are you talking about? The fun of doing it." But then it's not me not being able to see. No, it's
Yeah.
not fun. It is risky as hell, and I could mess up. And if I mess up, it's going to be really bad. I'm going to feel really bad. And like they're not saying that to me, right?
Right.
Generally, but sometimes they are because they're very transparent. But like, um anyway, just like, so I think that how do we, how, like, our perspective when like, I think what you're saying is that you're interacting with people and you could suddenly, when you kind of took a step back, a less personal attachment to what other people are thinking, you are
Mm-hmm.
able to see that, I am human, you are human.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that we have commonality, that we're not irrevocably different from each other. But that required you to have some uh
It
it required you go.
yeah, it required me to be really in touch with my internal family. I think that's what I meant to say. Like and you just said when you were in the beginning, when you were triggered, like there was other parts of you that stepped in, like, oh, I need this. I need, this is how I take care of myself when this part of me is triggered. It doesn't mean that the part of you doesn't get triggered. It will. But you have
Hmm.
another part in you that can see a bigger picture, can step in, knows how to ground it, knows how to step away, knows what you need, knows how to take care of that part. So again, we are not, yeah, we are a multiplicity of things. And we can, in a sense, like reparent ourselves when we get older, as we develop new skills, build our own capacities through our own healing work. We can go back in, and these little kid parts of us are going to be there, and then we can but we can hold them, we can be like, okay, what do you
Yes.
need? We can talk to them
Yes.
very, very kindly. That's one of the things that I've learned to do, is instead of being like, oh, shut up, what are you bitching about? Be like, whoa, what do you need? Like, okay, oh, you really scared? Okay, like what would make you feel less scared right now? Like a kind teacher that you probably do talk to your children in your classrooms, like have that voice, the nurture voice.
Yes.
Nurture
Yes.
culture isn't something that's just happening outside. It's not even things we do for other people. It has to start with a voice that we have for our own inner children, our own inner selves. And there's lots of little beings inside of us. There's scared ones, and there's, confused ones, and there's ones that are jealous, and there's all these things that are going on. And the more aware you get of the family that you have, as well as you've got these other pieces that are like ancestral and soul urges, and there's a lot of things going on. We are mythic. One of the reasons I love astrology is because of how mythic it is. I'm not like, I don't look at it as like a science. I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna bet my life on this planet doing this or whatever. But I love that there's this mythic language that is associated with actual, astronomical things going on that I can use to like relate to, like, oh, this is happening. This energy is happening. And then this little part of me can relate, from my chart to that. And it's like this whole big like story being told, and I can interact with it as much as I want. Like these quests are being offered, or these challenges are being offered. And I think that is what Indigenous peoples around the world, because at some point we were all in these systems of telling these stories and myths, they all had that. Like there was very few of them that said this is one thing that's going on. It's one story. It was like, no, there's lots of stories. And those parts, these gods fight with each other, and they attack each other, and they kill each other, they chop each other's heads off, and they, have sex with their own kids. Like there's all kinds of crazy shit going on. And it was this acknowledgement that there's all these parts of us, that are good, bad, crazy, everything in between. And how do we deal with all these urges and as part of being human? I think that, and so what's interesting, what his definition of gratitude is being wholeness, is like there is some acceptance in there that, yeah, I am all of these things. Everybody is all of these things. And that's okay. And actually it's really awesome and beautiful that we get to experience all this as humans. Like this is part of what we're here to do. And and I guess that he said, I like that he says it's a momentary state because it's wonderful when you feel that, when you really feel that integration in these moments where like, and it's not something you could fake. You can't be like, oh, I'm so grateful for it, if you're not really in a state of gratitude. Gratitude is that moment when you're like, oh yeah, this is it. This is life. It's crazy. Here I am.
Yeah,
for
totally.
all of it. I'm here for all of it, even if it's something bad going on. In my divorce, I had very profound moments of gratitude. In my grief, I had very profound moments of gratitude and grief. Because that's when I think the shadows are being pulled into the light. You're really, now you're looking at things that we gloss over in the culture. We don't look at the dark things, the sad things, the broken thing. And when those places have a chance to emerge and you're actually able to sit with them and be like, oh my God, I've been ignoring you forever, and you're crying and you're like, how could I have been so stupid? Or how can I've, spent so much time running away from this piece of myself? It's like you allow that piece to be there and you're crying with it, or, awashed in shame or whatever it is, but you're saying, okay, you're here,
I mean,
it's great. And you're grateful in this weird way, right? That this all exists.
I mean, I was thinking about one of the things that this morning, of realizing that part of this is new behavior for me to reach out when I'm in crisis, like, and I mean, pretty new, pretty really seriously new. Like usually I'm like, I wait till I'm like, unless I can't help it because I'm physically next to the people and they have to watch me lose my shit. Like if I'm losing my shit, I am not involving other people in it usually. Like that's my MO. But the realization this morning of like that puppet, it's like, it's not okay to like trying to talk myself out of reaching out when I realize I need to get my shit together because I need to figure out what I'm going to say to my boss, and and I need help. And then the other part of me is like, oh, just get a, it's, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And realizing that the part of myself that was like not wanting to ask for help, it's like, I could just realize it's like, oh my gosh, that's like such a little part of myself. When did I not get help? When did I learn that I can't accept help or that I can't even ask for help. Like
Mm,
that's a really young version of myself. And I do feel deeply grateful that I get to be working with kids right now because
mm,
it's like, you know, you're standing in front of 20 children and talk about like there I am, 20
mhm.
versions of me. And
Yeah.
all of us are doing that for each other all the time. Like what you were saying at the table. There we are. Here we all are.
Mhm.
Here's where all my puppets started. And, you know, and it's like, yeah. Anyway, I don't know if that's was a good
Yeah, no,
connection or
I do think I think children I definitely think children are so like we it reminds us that they that we're allowed to be like scared and confused and like we see it all just in the open. They haven't developed their cultural defense mechanisms and hiding and pretending that everything's cool or I got this or like what all the things we do to back away from being vulnerable and or looking stupid or being embarrassed. I mean, all the things that we in the culture we're supposed to be so on top of our game and you know and that I think I thought it was so fascinating when he was talking about these winter rituals. And I mean, Thanksgiving in terms of the whole indigenous piece are like, I can't, I can't even with the whole American piece of this.
yes,
Like, so
yes,
I'm not even
yes.
talking about it in relationship to that story because I think
Bullshit
it's
lies.
bullshit. Yeah, it's just like ridiculous. So my apologies to all indigenous people of this, continent this is still going on with that story attached to it. But if you were just going to look at it, which I do, and I don't really celebrate it, although I did go to Costco and buy an organic turkey because I wanted an organic turkey and they never carry it
Right.
unless it's Thanksgiving. And I'm like, damn, I'm gonna go get my turkey. But for no other reason other than I want to eat turkey. So for my own self. um, but besides the point, I was just like, yeah, this idea that there's these winter rituals are the designed to honor the darkness, to honor the things that we don't normally look at, honor the parts of the community. And I mean,
Hmm.
ideally, if we were going to do Thanksgiving as a ritual for the culture, like let's say we're going to put it back into its actual ritual without just this little tiny, meal that is basically based in consumerism, there would be, right, some kind of talk about the hurt and the lies and the all the things that has happened around indigenous people and around the land and around our food systems. And I mean, that would be like there would be some purging and some grief rituals or some something that would happen that would get it out, like help us as a culture to like talk this through, get it out, get it on the table, like talk about all the things that, are wounding that exist today because of that wounding or whatever. You know what I mean? I don't know how that would be
Yes.
as a nation. And then the gratitude would come when we make that transformative, conversation happens and that maybe things are understood or acknowledged or shifted at some deeper level. That the gratitude would be after that purging was done, whether it was a sweat lodge or you know, a bonfire or whatever it was, burning or something we brought, something cathartic that we brought that's like, this thing is hurting me. I feel this pain from living here and on this land and not acknowledging this. Like it would be acknowledged and not just like, oh, we live on the land of blah, blah, blah. These verbal acknowledgments, and then we just
Yes.
go on as usual normal. We just plow forward. But I mean, a real acknowledgement and a grieving and a reckoning, you know, and then the gratitude would be the meal that would come after we've done that work. And it's like, oh, we did the work, we've cried, and now we can sit and eat and just be grateful for each other that we were willing to go there and willing to, hold each other and witness each other and love and understanding. So like that is the ritual that Thanksgiving, you know what I mean? Like you see that, and so we've decoupled all of the powerful shadow, powerful parts of the ritual out. And what we came up with was, of course, what capitalism does is just buy things, buy lots and lots of things and eat lots and lots of food, spend lots and lots of money. And that's what we do. That's pretty much it. And then we'll have another one. Christmas will come and then New Year's Eve will come. And like, these are all winter rituals that we all have this opportunity to be much deeper, cathartic, dark
Well,
parts of the
I
year.
don't you think, okay, so I'm not gonna dredge up the names. I think their last name was the Glazer. They're professors at U of O that studied communication and at some Ford family thing. I have a book too, but anyway, we did this training with them. I did this training with them years ago. And one of the things that they were talking about is like intimacy is the result of successfully negotiating through conflict. Intimacy is not the absence of conflict.
Yeah.
And so I think about like for years, Joe and I basically had the same fight over and over and over again, like, and never really resolved it for years. Like we pretty much, and you hear this a lot of people, it's like people are like, oh, we always fight about X, whatever their X is. We had our X.
Yep.
And at some point, I don't even know how this happened, but at a certain point, we were having the fight, and suddenly we both kind of had this aha moment, probably that grace thing,
Mm-hmm.
and we haven't had that fight since.
Hmm.
and and it was like we could finally see through
Yeah.
the stuff and be like, oh, that's what, like, because we couldn't even hear what the other person was saying because we could only feel our own like righteousness
Mm-hmm.
about it.
Mm-hmm.
And we had this moment of like really seeing what was motivating the other person and their actions and realizing that's like, oh, I was misinterpreting that to mean this. And the other person's like, I was misinterpreting that to mean, whatever. And which brings me to the idea that like, and this is we continue to have that fight long after like we started practicing and trying to learn nonviolent communication. And like, we like, we were actively working on our communication skills with each other and with our community. And like, we've both been actively participating in like learning how to be good collaborators and how to like organize and how to, all the things with ourselves, with our kids, with the community. Like, and yet we continued to have pretty much exactly the same fight for like 20 years.
Yeah, that's the shadow. That's the piece with like everything you said, like we did everything right. Like everything that was out in the light was totally in the light. But like the thing we were missing was the thing that we couldn't see, which is why we kept repeating this over and over and over until we could see it, until
Yes, 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 yes.
yeah. And
And
I
yeah,
think there's a place for ritual there. Like I think that is where ritual shines, is the ability to create these like spaces where all of a sudden you're permitted to say all the things. You know what I mean? You're not holding back. You're not trying to do nonviolent communication. Like, you get it out, and it's not, and
yeah,
it's in
yeah,
a
yeah.
ritual space. So it's not like I have to do it perfectly. And I have, it's like blah, whatever that looks like. And I think that I think there's a big healing in that. I really do. I think that's, and maybe that's not with the person you're having a direct conflict with. And maybe I'm not saying that people should do this with their families.
Oh yeah,
Please don't take this as a prescription to go
yeah.
home and do this with your family.
Oh yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
not what I'm saying. I'm saying for ourselves, like whether that's a journal or, you know what I mean? Like just trying to have some ritual for yourself, like catharsis. So when you go to these other, like what should be like the follow-up to the ritual, which would be the dinner where we express gratitude, like you've done some work, that you've done some processing around getting some stuff out, however that looks for you. Like, and I don't think we should ever expect everybody's journey to match ours, so you definitely could
Yes,
be in a
yes.
place where you're doing your journey and you're way ahead. You see things that other people in your family have no idea about, and isn't your job to make them great. You can't force people to be grateful. It's just the reality. Like you can't
You
make
can't,
people,
right.
you cannot make people by explaining them or giving them information to suddenly be grateful. Because grateful
Because
is
it's not in
exactly,
that, it's not the head.
no, it's not the head. It's the moment you talked about. It's the click. It's like when all of a sudden the wholeness, somehow you get it. You're like, oh, I get, this is the part of me that's fighting with you. Is I see this part of me now. I see what the problem is. I see why, you know, it was being filtered
And
through
it
this other
makes
part,
sense. It totally
and it
makes
makes
sense.
sense. Yeah. And there's a healing in that, and there's a wholeness in that. And it doesn't mean it's everything is fixed or perfect or happy. It's just that all of a sudden you understand, like you like, and within that there's gratitude, because you don't have to have this fight 25,000 more times. Like you got it, you
I
know?
feel like it's that moment of acceptance and wholeness is coherence between the wit, Ken, no.
Yes, yes, definitely. Yes. Or between your ancestral self, your, electric new energy self, and your family self, because
Yes,
those
yes.
are three parts we're weaving together too. And I really love that concept, because it really helps me think about all of the parts of me that aren't based in my family of origin, because I do acknowledge that there are parts of me that, you know, yeah, there's a definitely, I love my family, and there's a part of me that definitely is of them and vibrates, very strongly with that energy, and I understand it, and I'm working to heal and honor all of those parts. But like, there are other parts there for sure.
Yes. Yeah.
And some, of course, ancestral is coming through the family line. So that's a person, but it's not just the family I grew up in. This is like bigger energy.
It could be like way back there.
Yeah, exactly.
It
And
could
just,
be, yeah, like it could be totally like I have no little to no stories for my dad's side of the family, but I
mm,
think that I've got a lot of them in
mm-hmm,
me. Like I think that as far as like, which branch of your family tree is lit up,
mm-hmm,
like I know a lot more about my mom's side of the family
mm-hmm,
than I know about my dad's side of the family. I know some, but it's like I definitely have felt like at certain times, like the part of my ancestry that is really lit up
mm-hmm.
is kind of unknowable, right?
Right.
Like because they're all passed away now. I have no one to ask,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I
and
think what's interesting about that is that each part of those, your family of origin, there's wounds that come from that, and there's gifts, right? And there's wounds and gifts that have come from your ancestral line that you're here
yes,
to heal. Whether you
yes,
understand why you were the wounded or not, there's a wounding that's moving through that line that wants to be healed through your life, and
yes,
gifts that you've been given that will help you. And then this new, I love that there's a third of you. It's just new, never before seen, like electric energy that's just uniquely you right now. That's your present moment. That's the part you get to create freely with all of these things, these gifts and these wounds together. We get to create freely. And that's what I mean by like gifts and wounds. Like, these aren't polarities, these are dynamic energies from which the
yes.
new gift comes. Like, we need them both. So I think that's like having gratitude for all of that whole process of chaos and creativity and wounding and gifting, and how we do it in our lives as well. Like, we wound and gift as we move through the world, we absolutely do.
Was I now I'm not going to get the words out, but a couple weeks ago I feel like we might have talked about it, having this realization of, oh, like in a tense situation, I can disassociate a little bit, like most
Mm-hmm.
humans, and I become like Uber peacekeeper, which is not always awesome because that's
Mm-hmm.
fawning, really.
Yep.
And it's
Mm-hmm.
not awesome in certain situations, but in a dangerous situation in which you have somebody who is dangerous, I
Yeah.
have successfully gotten a group of people away from a dangerous situation because I was slightly disassociated and went into this peacekeeper role.
I mean, that's what that's for. If that's a
That's
survival instinct,
yes.
and in a survival situation, it's serving you
That's
very, very well. Yeah.
very exactly. And
Yeah.
so instead of being like noticing that got, like whatever, it's, the fire alarm went off and that part of myself wants to step forward
Yeah.
and then being like irritated with myself, like when that in my interaction with the teacher who was a little rude, like that
Yeah.
part of myself definitely got like kind of like, oh, I'm on. But in
Right.
reality, what I needed to call up was the version of me with her hands on her hip that just like hauled off and punched my, the other kid in like our little pack of feral children growing up when, when it was necessary,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yes,
I
I
mean,
do.
I'm not, don't actually want to punch anyone, but I will admit that I grew up with, there were fights. I was involved.
I too was involved with physical fights when I was growing up. Absolutely was.
It was a different time, people.
And we grew out of that. So hopefully we're not
Yes,
still
yeah,
physically fighting
I have
as
not
adults.
punched anyone as
I
an
have not.
adult.
Although I did take a self-defense class recently and I realized that I don't even know how to punch exactly properly. They were having us
Oh
punch in
yeah.
this very specific way, these punching bags. And I was like, like I've never, it was kind of interesting. Like
I don't know how
a
to
part of
punch
me
actually.
emerged that really would like to know how to throw a good punch if needed.
It's true.
But I
Yeah.
digress.
Oh yeah, sorry.
We have to have all,
I
no,
totally
but we have to have
started
all
that.
the skills. Like, why not? There's a part of me that wants to know how to defend myself. That's a good thing.
Well, and
Uh,
the awesome call with my boss where I fessed up about letting my work computer be stolen. Um,
oh, I'm going to reframe that. You let it be stolen. That's
well,
not
I
exactly
did
how
because
that works.
well, I left it in the car.
Okay, well, you
So,
left it in the car is not the same as I let it be stolen. Like, let it be stolen is accepting some level of blame for something that you really didn't have control over.
oh, thank you. That's good. I need that.
You can
So,
say you left the car open. Okay, that's
yes.
fair. You left the car open.
Yeah.
But we know on the coast that that is a normal response to living where we live. So again, not an
Yes. Yeah.
not an invitation to have your work computer stolen. You didn't like put a sign on it saying please steal me and leave it on a
Yes.
park bench, you know what I mean? Like that would have been letting it be stolen.
Uh,
Um
so, but that is all really, yes, I'm going to be repeating that to myself. Uh, um, but part of the other conversation, because the whole meeting was like, I was like, all right, I want to strategize in how to handle the difficult teacher in a way that will be beneficial and benevolent and not like calling in the cavalry to like put them in their place because that would be completely ineffectual. Um, and part of that conversation was back to agency of recognizing and well, you've talked about this, like calling back my power and standing there and being like, here's what's expected, here's what needs to happen.
mm,
And did we talk about like my thing as a little kid somehow like hanging out with like the mama cat and having this like unassailable thing of like, I'm a girl and girls are more awesome.
no, but I like it.
So, so like, I don't know, like, but definitely an insult on the playground when I was
Mm,
the age of these kids that I'm hanging out with
mm,
was, you're just a girl, which
mm.
really meant thumbs down.
You
You're
are less
not,
than, yep.
you're less than.
Mm-hmm.
But at some trigger prior to me entering school, which I kind of, in my memory, it's me sitting on the stairs to the basement, watching this mama cat give birth on like we had the turning, so like there's
Mm-hmm.
like a landing, the mama cat having a little box on the landing or like a potato burlap sack or something. But anyway, watching the mama cat give birth and then she's nursing. And then I must have been started school because I think it was after I had catechism and learned about the Virgin Mary. But anyway, all of a sudden it was like this big download that made me impervious to the just a girl comments after that because I was like, dude, what are you talking about?
Right.
Like,
Oh, this whole thing is just
I am the divine feminine incarnate on earth. Like, I didn't have
yeah.
those words as a little kid, but like, I was literally impervious to sexist comments from the kids.
All
And
right.
because I was just like, I don't even know, I don't even understand what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Obviously, you don't know what I know. You know, like,
Yeah, but I
but
do. Okay, I was first of all, it's hilarious that you brought up the Virgin Mary and then cat giving birth on a burlap sack in the same, which I love. I love. Because she gave birth at a manger apparently, but I totally get that. But I think that is kind of goes back to those like if we had all been brought up with like the idea of the divine feminine and these bigger concepts, these mythic concepts. Like I was saying, like,
Yes.
as part of our initiation into adulthood, we've been told stories about how the feminine power is divine and devouring and creative and all the things that nature is and tied up with it.
Yes.
I think that we would, the culture, obviously, we would move forth into culture in very different ways, and the culture it'd be very different. So a lot of what we're talking about is always in our podcast culturally based. Like we're talking about, the ways the culture wounds us, the rituals that we have within it don't necessarily fulfill the deeper needs at play. And so we go to these Thanksgiving dinners and we're frustrated, or fights break out, or, there's no place for that. It's like, we all just have to be happy and eat dinner and like, everybody shut up and, get along, and then we'll never see each other again until next year. It's like, yeah, he's like, there's no, how is that going to work? I mean, how is anybody going to get any, how is anything going to change? So, I mean, I do think that is a part of it. Like you just said, like as children, we have to kind of embody these pieces of the bigger truth around us, that we're not these stories of the culture, that there are bigger energies at play. And of course, the feminine is very powerful. And of course, it's not less than to be a girl. That's ridiculous. It's like the most powerful thing you could be. I mean, look at it. Yeah, it's the power of creation. I remember
Right.
seeing that movie Legend. Do you remember seeing that movie Legend where,
No.
oh, it's got this big devil. I think it might be an early Tim Burton movie. I don't know. I can't remember who produced it, but it's cool. It's got a really, really young Tom Cruise in it. That's for sure. And it's a myth, it's about the devil and this fairyland and blah blah blah. But at one point they have to kill this unicorn, and
Oh.
I didn't kill the unicorn. And he's like, why didn't you? It's like, she's just a female, she has no power. And the devil creature turns around. He's like, only the power of creation, like, oh my God. And I remember, like, as a kid being like, yeah, that's right. Like, the female unicorn is the most powerful because she can create another unicorn. Like, of course. And like, just those moments where you're like, yeah, and it was a very early, like, shift in my,
Oh,
memory
nice.
as well.
Oh, that would have been a good
But I do
combination.
think that, yeah, I mean, these are these concepts that come through patriarchy and capitalism and all the things that we exist in. It's not that, I mean, I think I always want to say, like, it's the systems that are, it's not humans. Like, I think humans have amazing capacity for all the things under the sun, good and bad and everything in
Hmm.
between. And we are all human. And I don't care who you are or what political party you belong to, your capacity is the same as every other human. You are all those things. And the systems that we are currently living in are deeply broken, wounded, maybe insane, and, need to be radically rethought and adjusted and transformed. So the way we do that, and try to end on this piece, the way we do that, I believe, is that understanding that gratitude is a state of wholeness, that we do this work in the dark times of the year, and these rituals when we gather as families, or just as friendsgivings, or not even for Thanksgiving, just any rituals that we're a part of in this time of the year, to integrate all of these pieces of
Mm.
ourselves and not demonize them. And that includes others, like not othering the parts of yourself. And you'll find, then we don't other everybody else in our world too. That othering of the parts of our internal family leads us to other in the outer world. Like, oh, I don't
Oh,
even,
yeah,
no,
absolutely.
yeah.
Like,
It,
and like the more hidden it is, the
yes,
more strong the reaction is, I think
yes,
sometimes.
yes. So that would be, yeah, my message for this week to everyone is just gratitude. Don't think of it as something you have in response to something you get, or like a good thing happening. Oh, I have gratitude for this beautiful sunset. That's great. But what you're experiencing is, you have gratitude that, all of you have is suddenly calm enough to witness
Hmm.
nature in its beauty, that you've calmed down all the parts enough to be present. That's what you're really grateful for, is that it's the momentary experience of wholeness within yourself, that you are in awe of what you should be awestruck of. We all should be awestruck of, just of being alive, because it's an amazing, crazy, psychedelic experience just to be here in this
Have
amazing
you,
planet.
and have you noticed like crazy rainbows in the
Yeah.
last 10 days. Like
Yeah.
it's like rainbows on steroids up
Yeah.
here.
Everywhere. They're all over. It's so cool. It's so cool.
So yeah. Oh my
Yes.
God. I love you.
I love you too. I'm so grateful for you. Somebody said that. And by grateful, I mean I'm grateful that you bring out all the parts of me that I think are hilarious and wounded and all the things. I'm grateful that
Oh
you
my
are my
God.
friend that I can have these weird conversations with.
I am too. I love it.
Because you are that you are that girl. All right. So much love to everyone out there. Go forth and please do not have a ritual with your family that includes, bringing out everybody's dark side this year. That was not what I was saying. I'm saying
No, no, no.
I'm not advocating for you to go do that, but no.
Yeah, and after I was like, I'm also not advocating that you punch anybody.
But hey, people are gonna be people, so go for it. Do what you gotta do.
Oh my
Okay.
God.
Love
I
you.
love you too. Bye-bye.